books is bit violent do uša.
Kogoś zorganizowanego, zrównoważonego i zdrowo
Péter Árpád.
TV. Regardless of your nation of origin, it is something we all grew up watching in some way or another. Truly a revolutionary technological invention that made almost every single person walking this earth better informed and better entertained. Except in Serbia. Since the late 50s, television has been a staple device in every Serbian household and a crucial player in the development of Serbian pop culture. Since the time of Yugoslavia, Yugoslav cinema, and by default, Serbian cinema, was a heavy hitter in the region, with films by Duško Kovačević and Emir Kusturica alike. Ko to tamo peva, Maratonci trče počasni krug, Balkanski špijun, Sjećaš li se Dolly Bell, and staple series of the time like Obraz uz obraz, Kamionđije, and Kocka Kocka Kockica, to name a few, becoming cultural juggernauts of the time period. As such, watching TV became a giant part of Serbian culture, with the average Serb in 2009 reporting to spend 6 hours a day watching the Magic Box. And while in the 70s and 80s TV programming was a spectacle to behold in the country, in the early 2000s, that wasn't really the case. As communism and authoritarianism fell in Serbia, the country, much like the rest of its peers in Eastern Europe, started to liberalize. Amongst the privatization of factories, mines, and farmlands, TV was also a subject of reform, and soon enough tens of hundreds of new TV channels became present throughout the country. A lot of the new channels available broadcasted typical entertainment for the time, like American movies, anime, cartoons, music videos, and of course, new and original Serbian language programming from recently opened TV stations. However, amongst this new diversity of entertainment, a new type of programming became increasingly popular: independent self-broadcast. As an unsupervised 5-year-old throughout the early 2000s, I remember when surfing channels looking for cartoons, there were tons and tons of call-in talk shows with some sort of gimmick present, all ranging from talks about politics to religion and gossip, where with a little bit of money spent you could call the host and give your opinion or ask him a question. Yet arguably the most memorable of these was none other than Vidoviti Milan.
Vidite ovde, vi ste bili u prošlom životu kokoška.
aka Clairvoyant Milan. Vidoviti Milan, or Milan Tarot, was a show where the host, Milan Radonjić, would dress up in kitsch wizard costumes and more often than not wear some ancient Egyptian paraphernalia whilst getting calls from viewers who wished to get their fortunes told or curses lifted. Now, esotericism, black magic, and fortune telling have been popular in the Balkans since their conception, and TV shows delving into the subject were nothing outside of the norm. However, what made Milan's show different was that he was clearly parodying a fortune teller, but the callers believed him to be a serious wizard.
Pa moj čukun deda, kad je bio šerif na Divljem zapadu, imao je platu $80. To je. A sad šerif ima koliko? Ko zna.
As such, throughout the runtime of his show, Milan would constantly get calls from gullible old folk who believed he had magical powers and would ask him to lift curses off them and heal their ailments. The comedy from this show came from his extremely absurd and nonsensical methods of fortune telling and curse lifting he'd perform on live TV, while the people calling him took him as 100% serious.
Slušajte, evo je ovde karta, on ima problema sa probavom.
Dobro.
Kažite ako nije tačno.
Jeste.
Vidite zašto mene zovu čarovnjak. Mora da gurne prst u dupe. Sredom i petkom od 9 do 10 da drži prst u dupetu.
Čekajte, srijedom.
Da, i proći će mu probova, a dok bude sedeo, znači ovako kako čuče, kako gurne prst u dupe, neka gleda u poster Snoopa.
Šta je to Snoop?
Pa Snoop Doggy Dogg, onaj crnac. Jer bog probave je Snoop Doggy Dogg. Znači samo prst u dupe i gleda u Snoop Doggy Dogga i to je to. Nema šta. Jer znate vi koliko ljudi sam ja izlečio od probave? Da li ste vi svesni? 412 milijardi ljudi sam ja izlečio od probave.
However, my favorite episode was when someone called to have a curse lifted from their house, and Milan's solution was to cast a spell cursing Hakim Olajuwon, a basketball player from the Houston Rockets.
Na kuću imate urok Enzo Ferrari, on baca to. Ma da, i to kroz dimnjak, jel ste primetili da kao vam nekako kleci u kolena i nekako ne može da se krećete?
Da,
I teško, kao da teško priđate i svađate se po kući.
da, tačno je.
To je od Enca.
Interesuje me da li možemo mi da ostavimo ovu kuću da živimo.
Ma ne
i
može,
dalje?
ne može, izađi ispred i pljuni 5 puta. Dobro, i kaži Hakim,
Hakim,
govno jedno,
govno jedno,
mamu li ti jebem.
mamu li ti jebem.
7 puta kaži.
Haki, govno jedno, mamu li ti jebem.
Bravo.
Haki, govno jedno, mamu li ti jebem.
Jače.
Haki, govno jedno, mamu li ti jebem.
Bravo. Jebo ga Houston, njegov što nije igrao u Lakersima.
As a 5 and 6-year-old kid, when first coming into contact with the show, I had no idea what the hell was going on, and quite frankly, I just dismissed it as boring grown-up content. Only years later, after I was in college in Belgrade, did I rediscover clips of it on YouTube, and naturally binge-watch them whilst laughing my ass off. Of course, that wasn't the only thing I discovered during my time in college. During it, I also bugged my mom to uncover my family tree, and what a shame it was that I did not know then about my heritage, baby! My Heritage is a worldwide leading family history service. With over 19 billion records, My Heritage helps you discover your long-lost family in an easy and fun way. With just a couple of clicks, you can discover an entire family history you never even knew about. By building your family tree on My Heritage, even if you don't know much about your family's origins, you can still find new family members and their records with little to no effort. For example, my great-grandfather after World War II fled to Australia for no reason whatsoever, abandoning his family in Yugoslavia. But after I just put in his name and basic data, My Heritage just pulled up Aussie documents about him like it was nothing. You've all seen my video about DNA, but using My Heritage's DNA test, I can get an even more accurate picture of my origins. Who would have thought I actually even have 13% Iberian in me? Also, if you happen to find any old photos of relatives, My Heritage can repair, colorize, enhance them, or even animate them. So don't waste any time. Click my link in the description or scan the QR code to start your 14-day free trial today and discover your family right now, only on myheritage.com. Of course, Clairvoyant Milan wasn't the only absurd show being broadcast. Another cult classic from the era was Kursadžije. Now, if you're a fan of my channel, you're probably a fan of ironic meta-comedy about absurd Balkan stereotypes. And if you are, then my friend, this show is for you. As Kursadžije was essentially r/2 Balkan for you, but in the format of a severely underfunded live sitcom. Essentially, the show was set in a police academy where originally 6 and then later on 8 students, each representing a stereotype from an ex-Yugoslav republic, attended in the hopes of becoming a part of special police forces. You had the Croat named Hrvoje Metlicic, who was depicted as a teacher's pet, snobbish, nerdy, and seeing himself as better than all his other peers.
Razlozi zbog čega je lijepo biti Hrvat. Prvo i najvažnije, nisi Srbin. Drugi razlog bi bio, možeš se pretvarati da ti se jezik razlikuje od srpskog, iako se ne razlikuje. I treće, imamo demokracijski izabranog predsjednika koji se nikad nikome neće ispričavati za ono što je počinio.
Tačno, ovaj njegov gde god ode, samo izvinite za ovo, izvinite za ono.
But most importantly of all, he was constantly beefing with the Serb and trying to one-up him.
Da li vi uopće znate koji je rezultat 10 Srba na 10 muslimana? 20-0 za Hrvatsku.
The Bosniak, Fikret Karakurtovic, on the other hand, is stereotyped as a dunce and extremely stupid.
Da zapišemo po nešto.
Odmah da pišemo.
Odmah da pišemo.
Kojim slovima, profesorice?
Jedno veliko, jedno malo. Jedno veliko, jedno malo.
Čekajte.
Nemoj me zbunjivati.
Molim vas, čekajte, nije važno kako, važno je da znaš posle da pročitaš, razumeš?
Ja ću onda crtati.
But very well-meaning and often the butt of many jokes amongst the rest of the cast.
A inače, Bosanci su neuništiv narod, profesore. Da vam objasnim. 7 dana posle raspada 2 kule u New Yorku izlazi Bosanac ispred ruševina, stresa prašinu i viče: jebova svaki aerodrom.
The Serb named Crazy Milojko, but nicknamed Geđa, was stereotyped as being vulgar, cocky, chauvinistic, overtly nationalistic,
Neće biti Srba, majko, na plažama Crne Gore, bit će njima pusto more.
and constantly having problems with our students, mainly the Croat and Albanian.
Ja?
Da priložite nešto u humanitarne svrhe.
Ne dam.
Ima tamo i vaših, tamo je i DS, i DSS.
Šta ste rekli? Pa da. Ima? Da. U tom slučaju, ko bre neće da da? Ko bre? Ko neće da da?
The Slovenian, Janez Drško, to no Balkan stereotype consumer surprise, is depicted as a raging, jolly homosexual.
Profesore, ja bi vrištao kad bi video teroriste i onda bi mu skočio u krilo. Tako bi ga onemogućio.
Overall, he is generally liked by all the other students, but is often made fun of because of his homosexual tendencies by others and himself.
Dajte mi neki primjer iz komparacije.
Velik, veći, još veći, najveći taman.
The Montenegrin, Đuro Palica, on the other hand, is depicted in typical Montenegrin fashion as being lazy, easygoing, hysterically revisionist, and as a corrupt policeman.
Lijepo je biti Crnogorac zato što možeš misliti o Rusiji kao svojoj majci, iako ta majka Rusija nema pojma da si joj ti sin. To je jedan razlog. Drugi razlog, ne moraš ništa da radiš u životu. Treći razlog, možeš, brate, profesore, svercova cigar iz Italije koliko hoćeš i da živiš kao kralj.
The Macedonian, Ubavka Seksovski, is basically stereotyped as a sex symbol. Within the show, she says little and the others rarely pick on her except for the occasional sexual harassment.
Profesorka,
Molim.
ja nisam raspoložena za odgovaranje.
A zašto?
Pa, svi zboruvaju da Makedonija je Grčka.
Pa kažu i da je Kosovo Srbija.
The Albanian from Kosovo, Ajdemi Popuši,
Ajde mi popuši, gospođo.
was my personal favorite. He is stereotyped as being illiterate, vulgar, jolly, having a shit ton of kids, and always one-upping the Serb.
Šta je to vodena para?
Vodena para, to je ona para što se dobije kad prodamo vodu. Evo, ovi Srbi su prodali i Knjaz Miloš i sve što su imali vodene su prodali, sad nemaju ništa.
Last but not least, there's the gypsy Salveta Jovanović. She's depicted as a janitor, a common job taken up by gypsies in Serbia, as well as a strong, proud gypsy woman who delves into black magic and fortune telling.
Jel ovo vam je prvi posao ili ste radili još negde?
Sam radila u Skupštinu Srbije.
Pa dobro, kako vam je bilo tamo u Skupštini?
Mnogo težak posao.
Pa što?
Mnogo sera u Skupštinu.
And although the show was criticized for being extremely simplistic, relying on single punchline stereotype jokes, it still created a cult following and is fondly remembered today. Of course, there were also more sophisticated sitcoms broadcasted as well. Another one of my personal favorites was Nadrealna Televizija, Surreal Television, which was a skit-based show similar to Saturday Night Live, except it satirized Serbian culture, politics, history, and society. One of the most famous episodes was when an auto-chauvinist Serbian NGO director travels to the EU. While on the plane, she falls asleep, and after she wakes up, she finds out that the entire plane is run by Serbian Chetniks.
Video prezentacija naše kompanije Chetnik Airlines.
Dobrodošli na 1 do 457 letova kompanije Chetnik Airlines.
Našim avionima upravljaju vrhunski piloti.
Osnovana pre 100 godina na Ravnoj gori. Spada u 5 najfrekventnijih kompanija u velikoj Srbiji i svetu.
Čestitamo, i vi ste naš putnik.
A da li ste naoružani?
Ukoliko niste naoružani, ne brinite. Chetnik Airlines vas naoružava najmodernijim pješadijskim naoružanjem. Vaša sigurnost, naša svetinja. Čepnik Airlines ima 3 prstena antiterorističke odbrane.
Another one of their classic skits was when the Serbian folk hero, Marko Kraljević, famous for fighting the Turks during the medieval Ottoman occupation of Serbia and helping the oppressed Serbs under them, is arrested by the authorities and taken to the Hague court for war crimes in the former Yugoslavia. The entire episode satirizes the period in Serbia after the Yugoslav wars, which was famous for the media constantly giving reports on the court cases of the arrested Serbian politicians and military leaders, as well as the public opinion about the events in The Hague and the protests outside of the court. However, it also satirizes the court procedure and judges themselves, which was best shown in the scene where Musa Kursadžije, Marko's Turkish arch-nemesis, is called to testify against him as a witness.
Recite mi kako se zovete.
Kursadžije Musa.
Musa, šta ste po nacionalnosti?
Albanac, Bošnjak, Musliman i Stutina.
Šiptar, bre.
Poznajete li optuženog?
Da.
Od kada?
Pa 700 godina.
Na čemu je bio zasnovan vaš konflikt?
Na veri. Mi smo različite nacionalnosti.
Lažeš, pičko obrezana.
Kad ste prvi put primetili da vas on ne voli zato što ste različite vere?
Primetio sam kad je počeo da me zove Turčinom.
Turčin?
A da li ste vi Turčin?
Ne, Albanac, Musliman, Bošnjak i Stutina.
Which to this day still cracks me up. Some other notable mentions for sitcoms were also Naša Mala Klinika. Originally, this show was created in Slovenia, but was adopted by both Serbia and Croatia, similar to how The Office found its start in the UK, but was then adopted for the American audience. Essentially, the show criticized the dysfunctionality of the Serbian medical system, its incompetent doctors, complicated bureaucracy, insurance bullshit, and everything and anything in between through a comedic lens following happenings in a fictional dysfunctional clinic. There was also a plethora of extremely unfunny shows. I'm going to get so much shit for saying this, but it needs to be said, goddammit. The creme de la creme of the painfully unfunny shows were ones like Selo Gori, Baba se Češlja, The Village is Burning and Grandma is Combing Herself, Bela Ladja, White Ship, and the Bosnian maid Lud Zbunjen Normalan, Crazy Confused Normal. Selo Gori, Baba se Češlja was and is one of the most popular shows, if not the most popular show in Serbia of all time. It follows a family that lives in a traditional Serbian village of Petlovac and the zany, wacky situations they get into, which would be fine and dandy if the characters weren't so one-dimensional, the dialogue wasn't so painstakingly boring, and the videography wasn't on the level of a 5th grader attempting to make a sketch comedy video for YouTube. A lot of the time, much of the episodes don't even have a plot, but just revolve around the characters talking to each other about nonsense and someone saying something that could be interpreted as a funny quote. Also, a lot of the show's jokes were based on stereotypes about villagers, so much so that it showed every single one realistically except for where the young son leaves the country to live abroad and marries a Scandinavian woman. Because why the hell would a hot blonde chick marry a Serb? Also, now that I'm older, I low-key think that they made fun of autistic people with the character of Son Dragan. If you don't know, Serbian people don't get checked for disabilities, instead they are forced to work on the field. But I digress. Bela Ladja, which was another extremely popular show for its time, isn't that much different. In it, the show follows the eccentric protagonist Srećko Šojić, ex-businessman who has now switched his career going into politics. The show aims to criticize the Serbian political system by satirizing how it works, corruption, and current events at the time. The writing again was just god-awful, and I'd rather listen to a cheese grater being dragged over a microphone on max volume than 1 minute of dialogue in Bela Ladja. Essentially, people would focus on how Šojić was zany and said some one-liner in the show, and that was the entertainment factor. My late grandpa in particular was the show's #1 hater and couldn't stand it on TV. And after growing up and checking it out for myself, I get why. Last but not least of the big 3 unfunny ones is Lud Zbunjen Normalan, aka LZN. LZN follows a family of 3 men, a grandpa, father, and son, who live in Sarajevo. The father struggles with getting a job and financial issues, while the son is trying to finish university, and the grandpa is mentally ill and the comic relief character. Again, the majority of the time, this show as well wouldn't have any plot, but focused on the dialogue of the characters and XD funny random stuff the grandpa would say. I especially fucking hate this show with the full force of my heart because one of my girlfriends adored the show and would watch it every goddamn night before bed and fall asleep to it. So for almost an entire year, every fucking night, because we lived in a 20-meter squared apartment in Belgrade, I was forced to watch this unfunny piece of shit show, because of which my mental state has deteriorated worse than the railways in Zimbabwe after the fall of Rhodesia. Nevertheless, if anything, this show should be called Lud Zbunjen Pedophile because the actor for the son was caught messaging kids. So maybe after all our entertainment wasn't that far behind Hollywood. To this day, I still don't know why these three became as popular as they did. A part of me thinks they were so bad that they were good and people just watch them ironically, but I genuinely am not sure. If you like these three shows, please, for the love of God, tell me why in the comments. Of course, you can't talk about Serbian television without mentioning reality TV. Now, reality TV overall in Serbia is quite big. Two of Serbia's biggest telebroadcasting companies, Pink and Happy TV, became filthy rich from shows like Zadruga and Farma, which showcase a bunch of, let's just say people with a combined IQ of a room's temperature, living together on a farmhouse and them arguing, cursing each other out, and getting into fistfights. This programming is extremely controversial as a huge number of young, educated people find it abhorrent and damaging and have tried to create several petitions and movements to have this type of programming banned. However, the old and rural population keep it going, because why the hell not? But that's a story for a video of its own. What I want to talk about is the cringe-inducing reality TV, the so bad it's good reality like Luda Kuća, Crazy House, and Brak the Nevidjeno, Blind Marriage. Luda Kuća was essentially Serbia's Maury Povich show and the epitome of trash TV. However, except for an old white guy as a host, the show was run by a gay gypsy in a suit. As Serbia is a small country where the people aren't the biggest fans of going to the public to solve their domestic issues, the show had to hire amateur actors and script its episodes. My favorite is the episode I'm a Dangerous Boy, where the host brings 3 different tough guys and 1 lesbian as a guest, who all try to prove how they're the toughest and most dangerous of the bunch.
Pogledaj čeka slepac, bre. Pa doveli ste slepo lice, on opasan.
Čovek nije slepac, čovek se prijavio na temu ja sam opasan.
Što onda nosi naočare, te bra, ja znam, brate, ono slepci, razumeš, nose naočare, ono, vidi, on stavio naočare, brate, otko znam slepo lice, razumeš.
As the episode progresses, they increasingly become more ratchet, shout over each other, and get into very real and completely not staged at all fights. And then there was my favorite show to watch in college while getting stoned with my friends. Brak the Nevidjeno.
Ja sam majka 6 dece.
aka Blind Marriage. The premise of the show was simple. People sign up for it, and then the producers play matchmakers and set them up to get married, where the contestants find out who their partner will be at the altar. The show claimed to take special precautions to try and make the best couples they could. However, it was obvious watching that they would more often than not just put polar opposites together for the sake of drama and conflict.
Ja sam majka 6 dece. Meni treba jak muškarac koji je stvorio isto kao i ja i koji može da me prestigne, da me nadmudri, da bude moj kralj.
But a lot of the time it was just pure awkwardness and cringe, which was the funniest shit ever, and God bless whoever came up with the concept of this show. And yeah, those would be some of the most notable shows and dumpster fires that were present on TV at the time. Of course, there's a lot more that could be mentioned and talked about, so if you have any that I missed, let me know in the comment section down below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, click that like and subscribe button, and if you really enjoyed it, become a member like these wonderful people, or go to buy some of my merch at theIronicShop.com. My name is Janos, and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.
Hey, hey,